All right, welcome to episode 8 of our Empowering Educators podcast. Today we are coming to you from the Hill Country in Boerne, Texas at Boerne High School. And our episode today is going to be focused on providing feedback to students versus just a grade and the powerful impact of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Just real quick, that's Chad Anderson. I'm Kacey Forks. We're instructional coaches here. So grading versus feedback, like it's a thing, right? I think just to start, like kids from the time they're enrolled in school, when they're little, like the focus is always on the grade.
The focus is the grade. Yeah.
It's a number.
It's a huge obstacle.
Yeah. Whereas the learning is what we really need to be focused on.
Yeah, so I guess that's a good clarification. When we talk about feedback, we're talking about, or providing feedback is focusing on the learning taking place.
Yes, absolutely. And making sure the kids, as they're learning, they're getting that feedback to continue and growing if they're making mistakes or they're not quite getting it.
Right.
Yeah.
So we would call that productive struggle and that safe space in the classroom where students are able to practice without penalty.
Absolutely.
Improving, working towards mastery, whatever the teacher has determined is mastery for that skill.
Right, those low stakes opportunities. Which does not mean low rigor.
That's a good clarification. Low stakes is not low rigor. It is just a safe space, just like we've described.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's critical that kids feel that they can make mistakes in class because it is part of that learning process. Mm-hmm. And like you said, that productive struggle.
So an obstacle is it is a systematic shift. It's a systematic 100%. Shift in thinking from state down to district to campus, but then going back, like you mentioned, from the time students get into that second, third grade, they start getting a grade, and it's about the grade. And so trying to the grade should reflect mastery of the TEKS.
Yeah.
And
it so often doesn't.
Oh,
so often the grades, there's no correlation between what that number is and what the student's level of knowledge or learning is over those skills.
Yeah, and I think some things we've talked about too is just as a teacher, I can only control the 4 walls.
Yep. And
I can only control either the 50 minutes or the 90 minutes that I have the student. So that has to be my focus. So we're starting to think, hey, how can I change my perception of providing feedback versus grades and control that, and then start from there.
Right, and like you said, it starts from the state, the district, the campus, but that classroom culture, right? So when teachers come in and they do have the control over what it looks like in their classroom, if they build a culture of learning versus grading, and they do that from the get-go, and we've heard a teacher even talk about how he managed this, it can change the way that classroom looks, and so it is unique to the individual teachers.
Yeah. So some of the obstacles that our teachers mentioned, because we ran this through a PLC last week as part of a series where we're looking at providing, looking at how we timestamp our lessons. Are we making smooth transitions, frequent transitions? What is vocabulary? What does that routine look like? Being purposeful and intentional.
Absolutely.
And then how do we engage our students with our lectures and in chunking different pieces?
Right, and not dragging them.
Yeah.
So we all know the attention spans are.
Right. Yeah. So this was kind of the last piece in a series, but I think you and I both are very excited about this piece and feel that it's a very impactful piece.
Absolutely. I think it's huge. And I think when teachers see the value, and that's something you always talk about, like, do you see the value in this? I think when they see the value in this and realize that this honestly helps them, the feedback up front and in the classroom helps them with the grading. It lessens some of that. And like you said, one of the big obstacles, our teachers, it's 150 to 190 kids.
Right.
It's an absurd amount of students. So that's a lot of grading when you break it down,
Right.
So the time that's involved in that is something that I think can be overwhelming.
Yeah. So you've got the the time factor it
Yep.
takes to grade, the number of students, like you mentioned. Some other obstacles would be just all the other things that teachers have to do within a class period. Juggling everything. And then, of course, the students being conditioned to look at just the grades.
Yeah.
So,
and that is a really tough one because, and one of the things that we hear the teachers say all the time is the kids always say, oh, is this for a grade? Is this for a grade? And they ask, you know, and then it's like if the teacher says no, well, then it's not worth doing. And so that, again, that conditioning for them to, well, if it's not a grade, it's not worth my time.
Right. Yep. And so that's where we're talking about putting that focus onto the learning.
Right.
Right? Shifting that. How are you going to learn? What steps are you going to learn today to progress towards whatever that end product is going to end up being?
You know, and sorry to cut in, because this was just a random thought I had. You know, our teachers are required to have their content objective, language objective, closing task, and the idea behind that is that the kids really are able to take ownership of their learning, and that is one step in this when it's used correctly. When the kids know what it is they're expected to learn for the day, it helps them take ownership of that. Then it helps this is what I'm learning, and then at the end of the day they can say, yes, I did, no, I didn't.
That's a great point. Having that content objective, that is, okay, when you walk out, you need to know this, and starting the class with that, and then bringing that back up multiple times within the class period.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, where are we in the learning of this?
Yeah. So I know some things that we had talked about, and then again, a lot of this is feedback from our teachers through our PLC process. But one thing in our research that we found is grades don't often correlate to student mastery of skill.
Right.
So that's why we're talking about, hey, how can we move our focus and our shift to the learning?
Right. And it is tough. And, you know, I mean, there's deciding what to grade, deciding, you know, the number of grades and all of that. And when kids are trying, I think one of the things someone brought up was, you know, no, they don't always correlate. And you've got a kid who does the work and they do the homework assignments and they do all this. And so, but then if they take a test, that knowledge doesn't translate over. And so then they bomb this. And so it can be difficult when you have kids who are good at being students, but they aren't necessarily learning. So that's a tricky piece of this, you know, and but again, that's where that feedback comes into play, right?
Yeah.
So the hope is that as kids are maybe working on something or they're doing this work independently, the teacher's able to see, hey, you know, and I hate to, I mean, and it's tough nowadays too with AI and with these things that can help kids. And so that studenting, you know, being a student and doing the work can look different and turning that in.
Yeah.
But I kind of.
When you're talking about, so we talked like on our district expectations for teachers is 7 minor grades and 2 major grades per 9 weeks.
So it averages to 1 a week.
Right. Most of those 2 major grades, most of the time, I guess, are going to be multiple choice tests. And those are put in a system, for us at Eduforia, where it generates the grade. So the teachers aren't actually having to grade that.
Right.
So then it comes down to 7 grades, minimum 7 grades, which is 1 a week.
Yeah.
And so to your point, if I'm doing classwork and I'm turning these things in, I'm getting a grade, but then when I get to the test and if I'm getting a 90 or 100, but then I'm scoring a 40, 50, then I think providing feedback to students helps us be more purposeful in what we're assigning that we're going to grade.
Yeah. And I think we need to clarify really quickly what feedback looks like.
For sure.
Because feedback is not just great job.
Right.
It needs to be specific. It needs to be actionable. And the shorter the better, right? So one of the things that's important about feedback when teachers are looking is they should be looking at one specific thing. Because I have an English background, I'm just going to roll with that. So if teachers are looking, if students are writing, which we do a lot in ELA classes, maybe that day teachers are only looking at their thesis statement. And so the kids are still writing, they're still going, but what the focus is the thesis statement. Okay, does it check these boxes? Do you have this? And so as their teachers are walking around, they can individually confer with the kid, look at it, okay, you got it. Then if they're taking a check mark, they can just have a little clipboard and do a tally mark too. So and then the feedback can be immediate if they're not getting it.
Right.
So it's.
Exactly. So the feedback can be verbal.
Yes, great point.
And it can be written.
Correct.
So, I think the clipboard, having your roster there,
Yep.
and having, dates laid out. And so for our high school, we are on a block schedule. So our teachers are seeing their students twice a week.
Right.
And then on every other week, they'll see them a third time.
Right.
So taking time then to provide feedback early in the week when an assignment is given, and pulling a group while they're working. And so like your experience being with English, mine social studies. So a lot, they have to kind of identify either people or laws, but it's the impact of that.
Right.
Okay. And the way they see it a lot is in short excerpts.
Okay.
So they could be working, call a group up, and you're just looking for, can they identify the individual and what that stands for, or what they stood for, or what they were advocating, and you get that check, yes. And so then your big thing though is you're looking for what is the impact, and then they need to have the text evidence to back that up.
Absolutely.
So, so you bring them up. Okay, yes, you've got your individual, you've got your impact. Now, the final thing I'm going to grade is the relevant text evidence, but I've knocked out 2 of the 3 criteria within that class period as they're working on that.
Yeah, which is amazing. And again, a way of helping the teacher help the kids, but it's, on that, there's not so much on the back end. But
Yeah.
And you bring up a great point about the small groups, right? And that's something that we're working on now in small groups and intervention, and we were just fortunate enough to head over to Herf Elementary this last week, so thank you very much.
Yeah, we'd like to thank the principal, Jennifer Hammond, and the instructional coach there, Stephanie Edmondson, and then of course our dean, Eric Paul, and our principal, Shane Wilson, for allowing us to take a team of 7 teachers, so coordinating with the 2 campus administrators.